Welcome, Tom Hall here for another edition of Tom Talk. I have Michelle Higgins, and super excited. I haven't had a podcast in a while, but she really inspired me with her vision and her inspiration to kind of teach women how to invest and just a different approach to the psychology of money and the background on it. So I wanted to invite her in and share some different perspectives on investing. So welcome, Michelle.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So we were, I always love the, pre-podcast discussions because you start getting into like kind of the meat of it. And I think the psychology of money is such an interesting thing. And people have there's their family backgrounds, there's your unique experiences around, different financial transactions that you might have had, winning money, losing money. And so tell me how you got kind of interested in this psychology of money. Was it how you were brought up, or what was the kind of genesis of this?
From a very, very young age, I had a fascination with money. My parents had a few retail stores and a restaurant.
A lot of Monopoly in the house.
A lot of Monopoly. I had my dad's money bag that you remember we used to take to the bank and they'd suck them. That was my purse for years. So I loved and was fascinated with counting my pennies from a very early on. But then quickly, as my parents had financial troubles with the retail store and the business.
What kind of retail store was it?
They had Western stores down in the Central Valley. And I remember overhearing my parents struggling financially with the business and while my sisters, my cousins were in the back running around, I was pretending to do my homework.
How old
at
were
a
you?
young age, middle school maybe.
Okay, wow.
Middle school, all through, and then up to high school. I was always listening, thinking, why can't I fix this problem? What's going on? This can't be that hard. I remember trying to give my dad the $10 I had saved. And so clearly I had it early on. I get into the financial planning field and always wanted to know the why behind. The why behind do we spend? Why did you gift that person money? Why are you choosing to get into that investment? Why? And
interesting.
My clients would probably agree. I ask way too many questions before I get to the punchline. But for me, in order to do an effective job, I had to understand the why.
I should lay down on this couch.
Oh, come on.
And we'll do it later. We'll do a little analysis later. I'm going to lay down and just tell you about my parents, but most importantly, a couple uncles that kind of influenced my my relationship with money and investment. But go ahead.
Yeah, so that's the kind of end there. So I'd love to hear that. But the mixture of psychology with financial planning is the most brilliant synergy, if you will, to really understanding a client. Mm-hmm. To just jump to the money management, you're missing so much of what the client is trying to tell you. And the client doesn't necessarily know always what they're trying to tell you, or why they're worried, why they're anxious, why they have fears.
Gravitate towards certain things rather than others.
Right. And then we come into our marriage. You have a thinking about how you were brought. You have your fears, your worries, your euphoria about money. You meet your wife. It's all bliss. And then she has a different way of doing things with money. And you see why money is the second or first, in some cases, reason for divorce.
Yeah.
Because we don't talk in the same language with money sometimes.
That is so true. It's funny. When my wife and I got married, I was... we'll say 20,000 in debt.
Yeah.
I don't know what the actual numbers were, but it was definitely more than 10, less than 50. I had some school loans, I had a car loan. She came in with no debt, and had like $10,000 in cash. And I was like,
ready.
We're rich.
Yeah.
We are fired up. But she didn't know anything about how to like manage a household. She didn't know, because she lived with her parents. So we would get, so she just would pay bills every time. She wouldn't balance her checkbook, but she always had, but she knew that it was important to have, not spend above your means. So I remember, as a person that was always behind on my bills, we would get like the water bill, the rent, and I was like, hey, you can take care of our finances. Like the bills would come in and she would send them all out like in like the check. I was like, we don't even have any money for that. I was like,
But I'm dying to know, what did she think when she met you and you dropped the bomb that you had 20, 30,000, whatever it was of debt? Did she look at you and
I'll tell you what she said. She
oh,
goes,
I don't know about this.
She goes, well, we're getting married in 15 months. I think you need to move in with your parents and you need to pay off all your debts. And I did. So,
Smart. Take care of it quick.
So
she was raised definitely a way in which debt was not a thing in their family.
No. I mean, you have a house mortgage, but that was about it, right? You don't take on heavy spending that you can't afford, but both of her parents were kind of blue collar workers. And so they didn't really look at investments as a way to kind of make money. It was like you save, you pay down your house, you put a little money into retirement, and then you move on. That was.
So today, does she still handle all the bills?
No, I handle everything.
Oh, so you took it back.
I took it back after that first point, and she, it was kind of an interesting, she understands, like the basics of money, but not investing. And she really actually instilled in me like, hey, we're never going to overspend. So I never took on more debt for our family than, we could afford. So that was a lesson, but the bill paying and all that kind of stuff, she just didn't really gravitate to it.
Okay. That's kudos to you, because not always will you find a spouse that gravitates that way. If you're used to having debt or enjoy spending and you get that punch from spending, it's hard to always go to that lifestyle of, we got to wait until we have money to
It is
buy
kind of
something.
interesting though. We don't really talk about, I've tried to I sent her like this whole spreadsheet. I was like, here's all of our investments. Here's, here's everything here's all our passwords. Here's if something happens to me, you have to make sure you know all this stuff.
Right.
And she was like, I don't understand all this, and she's like, this is way too complicated. So then I sent it to my daughter who, I've raised since I had her on the phone when she was 5 years old. I was like, I want you to go pitch this, She's like, you got to pitch this fundraiser. And so she's calling around to, her family members. And then she first learned about bad debt, where she had people that said they would, put money into her fundraiser and they never sent the check, the check's in the mail.
Oh, boy.
So every time she sees this one uncle, she goes, he doesn't pay his bills. Yeah.
She's not going to forget that.
She doesn't forget it. So my dad was always with me with money. When I was young, he's like, money is a key to being able to provide for your family. He's like, you never want to be behind. And so he always taught me about money. My mom was different. She came from a big family. They didn't ever had a lot of money, and they were all about just survival. So my parents used to argue about money a lot. I mean, they got divorced, probably for reason number one, not reason number two.
Yeah. So you remember hearing them argue about money.
Oh yeah.
Did that bring you constant anxiety surrounding money, or you easily shook it off?
I didn't. I just some of their arguments were not necessarily about spending per se, but just he made all the money and my mom didn't work.
Interesting.
So she wanted her own independence, her own financial, freedom, because if you're at home, stay at home mom, and you're not, and you're raising 3 kids and your husband's out working, and then he's like, hey, I don't want you to spend on that. It's kind of like, where's the equality? Right. So the arguments were more around that than they were, we didn't have enough. We were okay. We were kind of, lower middle class, but there was never not food on the table when my parents were married. But my dad was always about hey, you gotta save money, you gotta invest. Used to always teach me about that, and so I just became very fascinated about the relationship of money and how it can really be an amazing tool to provide success, and then also a tool to invest and create things. And I saw my uncles, 2 of them, both create businesses. And that was kind of where I was like, wow, these people just took their minds and started a business and made their own money versus showing up to a job and now you're getting paid for your time. So
that's where you got the spark.
That's where I got the spark
to do this.
And so how about you? So you had this entrepreneurial parents.
Yes.
And you saw that. It didn't dissuade you though. So
It didn't. It didn't dissuade me. And when I interned in college, because I had to make money, so I got jobs in college, I interned with Lincoln Financial.
oh yeah.
My partners that I now own the company with, 3 of them, were working at Lincoln Financial. So
Okay.
then I moved over working for them. I graduated, went to work for Shell Oil. Great company, but just
Did you work in finance? then?
no, I was in marketing.
Interesting.
But
Okay.
I realized very quickly I don't like not being able to make more than that salary,
Right.
than that bonus. So my partners called me back and I got back into the business almost 30 years ago with them, became a partner and haven't looked back. We're still partners. It's really
30 years partners.
almost 30 years for me
So
with
that's
them. Yeah.
that's almost like a marriage because I've had partners
Yes.
for a long time.
Yeah.
And have you guys always viewed the business the same way? Like how's
Our partnership, we do recognize, because as you just mentioned, having partners that you can have for a decade, 2 decades, much less almost 3 decades.
It's unheard
It's
of.
better than a marriage, right?
Yeah.
It really is not the norm. I think the 4 of us, and now we have 5 partners, but the 4 of us just have this tremendous respect for one another
Mm-hmm.
that has never gone away. When the vote takes place, if I'm not getting my way,
You guys are
I
all
shut my
equal.
mouth and trust my partners. And that's the bottom line. We have never not been there for one another. We've always done what's in the best interest of the clients. I've never doubted that they would ever not do what's in the best interest of the clients. So it's been a beautiful marriage. Yes, we've had our times we don't agree on things, but 99% of the time we're looking at each other and we believe we could figure situations out.
Yeah.
COVID was a big one. Whoo, figuring when you have a whole firm that's in person, no one works from home, and within a week we've got to get everybody computers, technology, the intensity, the stress that comes with running a business is serious. And that by far, I think, is much more difficult than managing money. Don't you think?
100%. Yeah. There's always challenges, right?
Yeah.
And it's never, the challenges are always new. They're coming around the corner. You don't see them. And then you feel like you've, done one thing
right.
and then planned everything. And then you're like, well, I never even thought about that as a
Right.
scenario. Like COVID is a great example
Right.
of it. Talking a little bit about I'm very interested because, my daughter's my oldest child. She's the only one of my 3 kids that has shown a real interest in like business, finance, and money. And I was just at a big conference for National Multi-Housing Conference, probably 6,000 attendees. And so this is a very heavy finance oriented kind of conference. You have investors, principals, brokers, and it just kind of struck me as amazing that it was probably 5,800 men and 200 women.
Isn't that sad?
It was sad, but one of the women there is, a good friend of mine, and I introduced my daughter to her a couple years ago, and now my daughter is kind of on the path. She wants to get in the business, and I just told her, I said, hey, this is a very male-dominated business, and it kind of just like shook me, like when I was down there, because I knew I had this podcast coming up with you, that I'm like, how is it that you have this industry, which is a growing industry, and 95% of the people that are in the decision making of this are men.
Still men.
So why?
I've
Or what's your thoughts on that?
I've been fascinated with this for years, and I mentor a ton of women and young men into this business. This week alone, I talked to 2 students, which is a real side passion of mine, is bringing up the next generation into this business. But women, young women, I tend to believe what you're doing for your daughter is phenomenal, because if you have someone that is in the business, they're not as afraid. Your daughter's thinking, wait a minute, I can do this. Dad's taught me. I do this. I see it. Dad's okay.
But she doesn't have these role models, I think, that she can look at. And so I think that's what concerned me is I was like, maybe she'll look at me like another person like her dad, but it's just like the comfort being like, wow, I mean, I can imagine if it was the other way around and I was the only guy in this group of like all women, I would probably feel a little
It's
like,
intimidating. There's no doubt. I would say the first 10, 15 years, it's intimidating. Sheryl Sandberg wrote that great book about women sitting at the end of the conference tables, and women, it's a comfort. You said it. It is, if you are not comfortable, what are they going to gravitate to in college?
Right.
Is it marketing, possibly communications, social media, finance? All the guys are headed that way. I'm going to stay away from that. But who, in my opinion, some of the best financial planners are the women that can really sit there and talk things through.
Yeah. Just taking the approach of the psychology thing is such a unique thing. And I think that is maybe inherently like a woman's touch to it, because, you know, men maybe we're going to be more like black and white about something and just say, hey, here's my financial advisor has never once like asked me about like my relationship with money and why I gravitate to certain investments. But I just talked to him for an hour yesterday and I was thinking about that, you know. I made
You'll have to call him back after
I
this.
should, because, you know, hey, Drew, we'll have a conversation because this is good. But we were kind of going over like 4 or 5 growth strategies, right? Because I getting rid of one manager, going to pick another one.
Okay.
And I automatically jumped on this one, and, you know, out of 5.
Okay.
And it's because of the risk profile of it. But he never asked like why. He just like, oh, okay, that's a good decision. You know, it wasn't. But I think there's something there. Like, why did I choose that one?
Now, what's interesting also, Fidelity did a study in 2021. Women outperformed men performance-wise by about 40 basis points. There's been lots of studies over this.
Going for security. Because maybe there's too much volatility in a
overall,
trading platform.
if you're trading a lot,
you're
taking
gonna miss.
riskier bets, it's going to be more challenging.
Yeah.
So I don't find that women come in, and it really aligned with this study. Women want security. So if you were to go home and ask your wife, what is her primary reason for all these investments? Most likely it's going to be to take care of our family, create security. So if anything happened to you, she doesn't want to have to worry that her life is going to dramatically change, or she's got to be back to work in 2.4 seconds.
Right. Well, she does work, but it's so, you know, it's so funny because as I'm getting older, I think more about security. When I was younger, I was just like, I'll take more risk. You know, and then you get to a certain point. I was just running these numbers in my head last night where you're trying to go over like, how do I get to a point where I can, you know, have enough to retire? Right. And so you're kind of thinking more. And I think that way because I think if that's how my wife would think, it's like, oh, you know, we have to, you know, pay off our house loan, and then you have to like, you know, have this much set aside, and then what's our annual spending going to be when I'm not working, you know? So that psychology piece is just very fascinating, and the psychology difference between men and women. Do you find that it maybe is changing a little bit? You know, I know that, you know, there's women are becoming more empowered.
Yes.
They're getting a lot of. I've noticed a lot of my investors when I talk to their families, you know, the daughter seems to be kind of like the point person, jumping up and maybe taking on this kind of transfer of wealth. Have you found like a different dynamic, a different, you know, in the younger generation?
I will say from when I started to now, there is no doubt that we are going through a massive transfer of wealth to women. Yeah. And I think when you look at this next decade, women will probably control wealth by the end of this decade. And you look at why baby boomers.
And how long has, you know, maybe wealth been in the hands of a male?
Right.
So that you're talking about major transformational. And alongside of what you said are maybe different investment kind of practices, how does that change the investment landscape?
Well, I think so. If we think about it, women who are going to take over the wealth, the single women who've already been doing it and controlling their money, they obviously are possibly an edge, a step ahead. Someone who maybe just lost their husband and now is having to take over the wealth, or someone who's inheriting money they didn't have. Women are not afraid to ask for help. And that's what's pretty amazing is women are quick to say to me, Michelle, I don't understand. I know on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at a 2 of understanding. Get me to a 5. And I'm like, no, we're going to try to get you even more. Just know it's not going to be overnight.
Yeah, of course not.
So they are eager to learn and recognize that this is coming, and they have to understand how to empower themselves to take care of money. And I think we've done a pretty good job of teaching our kids, hey, this is a part of a topic that's not going to be taboo in our house.
Yeah.
Money was taboo for many, many, many decades. Don't talk about money in your house. And so we shouldn't be afraid. We don't want to be fighting in front of our kids. That's when it comes to money. But having these conversations like you're having with your daughter, explaining how a mortgage works, explaining inheritance, explaining how a car loan works, explaining how mom and dad are pulling off paying for college. I tell all my kids that I mentor, make sure you sit down with your parents and you understand how they're paying for your school and the budget, because you have to participate in this journey.
You have to. My daughter learned an important lesson. She was studied in abroad for the last semester.
Wonderful.
And she had we got her a credit card before she went, and she had some money saved up or whatever, and she totally just mismanaged her money. So she came back and she goes, oh my God, I have a credit card bill due. I haven't been working. I have no money. And she's like, what do I do? And I was like,
Sit down.
I was like, yeah. I was like, well, sit down. Right. I was like, well, why do you have no money? She goes, well, this and that. And I'm like, well, how much are you in the hole? Because she has this credit card bill. And, thankfully it was not that much. It was like $1,700. And I said, all right, well, I'll loan you the money. You can figure out how to pay me back. But it was an important lesson for her, because she realized the first time, like, I have no money.
Right.
What do I do? She's like, I got to go get a job babysitting. I got to go find this. I got to, start hustling.
Right.
And so that was the first, even though she heard all this stuff, I think those little small realities will kind of push you into a place of, oh shit, I got to learn about money, learn about it
quick.
Fast.
And it's not just one conversation. My girls will probably kill me because they're going to hear this. But I have 2 girls in college who have grown up with a mom that they hear talking about money 24/7. I've been just budget, on them. They both go off to college. Same thing. They get a credit card. They get an allowance. There are times, many, many, many conversations. We're going back to the budget. You missed your mark. What happened? And I'm sure they're tired of hearing about it. But it takes many conversations to get it right. And so if we get away from this money is taboo conversation, we're going to have a whole generation that respects money, understands it, spends maybe a little bit better than their prior generation.
Well, I think our country could use a little bit of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I didn't even know this was going to be part of the discussion, but you've talked about family and you've talked about your daughters. Do you your sister's here in the audience? Does she get to hear the money talk, or do you?
Oh, she's over it, I'm sure. Yes.
She's over it. I'm interested if she has the same, like, she had the same upbringing as you. Yeah. Do you have the same relationship with money? You can answer.
I do.
You do.
I'm very responsible with my money, and having my sister as a financial advisor, she taught us, very early on, the importance of budgeting, not overspending. So, I had
a mentor,
advocate from a very young age. My son just wrote a paper yesterday that included you. I brought it so you could read it because he's running for treasurer, and he wrote about how his aunt is, a financial advisor and has even taught him a lot about the importance of budgeting and not overspending and things like that. So yes, I'm very similar, and she's very proud of me with how I've taken care of, our family's money. And a lot of it is the security, like what she said. That's kind of the first thing I think of.
Interesting.
Is, being secure in the future. But do you remember? I asked my siblings and my
That's what I was saying.
cousins.
Do they remember the same thing as you?
No.
Because they don't. See,
They
that's-
do not remember. I've asked them, do you remember Mom and Dad fighting about money at the restaurant or the Western stores? And my cousins were all of them blank faced. No. So money does affect people differently. And this is an example that's really critical, because some people have it like you and I, the passion for investing. You're in the investing world. We get it. We have the passion. I'm horrible with IT stuff.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't want to do it. When my computer goes black, I'm pounding buttons, but I will learn it, right? It's not one of those things where I could just say, no, I'm not going to deal with it. We all have to, you don't have to love money like you and I do, or love the fascination with the cycles of the stock market.
Yeah.
But you've got to empower yourself just enough to
It's funny. You
take
might be
care.
the first person I've ever met. I have this weird. I love money. Like
Glad you admit it.
but not in a way like I just want to keep accumulating it. I just am so fascinated by it. What you can do with it, and the whole, first started with the whole scoreboard thing, and it's like, oh wow, the more, then you realize that that's not really the purpose of it, but it's such a unique thing to our society that
Right.
and around the whole world, everyone it's their main resource, to buy goods and to kind of live. And so the creation of it, like before it would be like, hey, you do this for me, I'll do that for you. And
Right.
and they created this like frictionless way to just transfer goods and services. And now it's basically, runs the world. And it's just an amazing, I love like reading, how money cycled, I just nerd out on it.
Yeah.
So,
And not everybody does.
No.
And so it's our job, it's my job for me to, and your job in your field, to help to help as many people as we can to bring them along. And it's my job, especially I feel, to help the next generation come up into this business, especially young women, and feel they can do this, they can feel empowered, and it's our job to teach. Teach first, and once you do that, success will come. I've always believed in that. Educating has always been a big part of what I do, and then the success comes.
So that was one of the topics I wanted to discuss with you, because you've written some books or some manuals on investing, and so teaching has always been a part of your passion, teaching about money. How did that kind of develop, and what's your kind of philosophy on
Well,
how to
if I could be honest,
educate?
maybe I didn't love the concept of marketing, even though. So I thought, I don't want to. How am I going to get new clients? I don't want to be out there marketing. I was starting to get referrals, and there was a common theme with the referrals that said, "Hey, thank you for taking the time to," and it was always, "Educate me on this."
Yeah.
Taking the time to write that book, it really helped my kid through college. Or thank you for the everything binder that is, if you pass away,
Yes.
it has everything. Thank you for taking the time.
That's the one I took a look at, which
Yeah.
is great. It's like that's not something people sit around and
No,
think
and no
about
one
that
wants
much.
to fill it out.
No.
Let's be honest. The everything binder is a document in addition to your trust or estate plan that you fill out, and it has everything your heirs will need.
Yeah.
From passwords to who's my gardener, safe code, letters to loved ones, everything in addition to the estate plan. It's not fun to fill it out.
I'm telling you, I have this spreadsheet, which is it's basically
it's
that.
your everything binder.
It's every password,
Good.
it's, all that stuff. But I never thought about it in the way you organized it. But yeah, it's not like you want to do that.
Right.
But
Because if something happened to your wife today, where's she? Well, after the initial morning, she's going to click and go, oh, I got to find that spreadsheet he
Yeah.
told me about 50 times over the last years
Yeah.
of our marriage, right?
Yeah.
And that is what has saved so many people. So,
because I can imagine trying to like
no.
sift through everything and like, what the hell is this guy doing?
It
you
is
know?
the next to, just keeping up with technology. When I lose a client, trying to piece together with their loved ones the things we don't know, it's It's time consuming. It's heartbreaking. It's challenging. You wouldn't believe how many people have safes that no one knows the combination, the trust's in there, the deed's in there, the money's in there, everything's in the safe. We don't know the combination, or they don't even know where they have a safe deposit box. So you don't want your family to mourn in addition to being in chaos mode of trying to find their information. Stuff. And in this world of technology, we have old school, like my dad, who still used the filing cabinet and paper, all the way to people who are completely on the cloud and they don't have a piece of paper in their office.
Yeah.
And then there's people like me that are a bit in between. That's a lot of work for your heirs.
A lot of work.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
did I overwhelm you there? I saw your eyes glass over a little bit.
No, I didn't glass over. I was actually just thinking, I was like, shit, I probably need to update that spreadsheet because look what I've done in the last 2 years that I haven't even put down. I was not glassing over at all. I was more as I'm thinking about like the money and the relationship between yourself, and then it's also like what happens after, right? And so, which is another topic that we kind of discussed a little earlier with transferring the wealth into the women's. I did want to go back to that though, because I don't think you actually. Do you think that will change the way the world invests? Because I was. There's all this money that's gone in like venture capital that's gone into like, maybe some pretty high risk like things that was been traditionally a very like private equity, very male dominated industry. Do those industries continue to flourish? Are women going to pour a bunch of money into these like high risk speculative investments?
That's a good question. And I have to pause to answer. It would be a guess. So I'll say this is a guess, no data that I know about. But when we look at what happens when someone passes, if the children are comfortable with their financial advisor, typically they will stay with them.
Got it.
Okay, so that I do know there is that relationship. If they do not have a relationship with their financial advisor, then they're going to go to someone they're comfortable with. That's where the investment strategy could deviate. Because if you know what mom's financial advisor has been around for 30 years, you feel comfortable, you're going to stay. They're going to stay with Michelle's strategy. It's going to be consistent, passed on to the next generation. But we are finding that many, many, many people are not comfortable with their financial advisors. And upon passing, it's legacy planning we're all doing. We do want the next generation. We want, but that takes a whole nother layer of getting to know you phase. So I do believe investing could change, but I don't think women are going to deviate from their path, going back to what I said of if they want security, and I don't believe that changes in women. That's their foundation. What's going to create security for me is cryptocurrency, the next hot thing for a woman, going to create security for me. Maybe for Jane it works, maybe not for Sue.
Right. So it'll still depend on the individual.
I think it's
and what they feel is secure.
I think so.
Yeah. I had a thought. Oh yeah. So speaking of like the new wave, and it's like how does AI play into all this? Like this is a whole separate conversation. I was kind of just jumping in. Another conversation I had with my financial advisor yesterday was, AI and how does it affect the financial services industry? And he was kind of telling me like, oh, I can like run this like really cool tool, and it can like run through all this analysis for me. And are you guys kind of exploring this as part of your like analytics or?
Yes, there are pockets. AI has just, I think it's hitting every business right now. And how can we implement AI and not lose customer service?
Right.
We still are paying for someone to be our receptionist. That's important to us. We're not going to have an automated AI, and so there's parts of our business that are non-negotiable still at this point. But as far as back office analytics, it's great.
Yeah, that's what he was talking about. Yeah, he's just...
The coding, the transfer to Excel, all the things that it can provide quicker, it's wonderful. And again, back to I'm 52. The young interns come in and it's like, Michelle, look at what this can do. They're the ones teaching me.
Teaching you, yeah.
And last year, one of my interns, that's what he was doing. What is AI doing to the financial service? How is it changing? Who's on the cutting edge? And he did a whole project on that. I'll probably have the interns show me what they're up to speed on now, because the 22-year-olds know it a lot more than me. So I will use it. We will continue to use it where we can, but we're not going to have it decrease
your touch
at all for now. Yeah.
No, it's. I think it's on everyone's mind, and it's such a new thing, so you don't really know. It's kind of like when computers came out, or when smartphones came out. Like you didn't realize
right.
what level it was going to change everything. So I think it's going to be one of those transformative changes. It's just kind of 10 years. We'll probably look back and be like, "Oh wow," or
Are you using it a lot here?
We do use it in a lot of more our operations down at the because we own and lease apartment buildings, and so we use a lot for automating like our kind of marketing stuff and chat bots for leasing off hours. So a lot of times people are just kind of emailing queries about apartments,
right.
And we have a live agent or a live leasing person that's available, we always go to that because they're going to have way better touch, like you said. But if it's like off hours and someone's like searching for an apartment at 11 o'clock at night, I don't have someone working
right.
then. So, that person at least will respond quick, or our AI person will respond. I should say AI person.
I know that did sound weird.
AI just does it, it's and so we use that, and I use it a lot for like analytics, like I was saying, where I can, hey, in 2024, like how many apartments were built and absorbed in Denver, Colorado, and boom, shoots out a
right.
An easy thing that I can use versus like having to go search a bunch of websites. And so I think that for that stuff, it's been efficient, but I don't have any idea how it's going to change investment analysis decisions, because that's one of the things that's coming out now is where is this a good investment? And there's not enough like maybe historical data into these large language models that can put the right output. But at some point, it's going to be smart enough to kind of do that. And then it's like, how does that level how does that change? If you're like, oh, should I invest in this manager or that manager? And AI is smarter to be like, you should definitely not do that. Then
let's talk about that. 90% of financial decisions are emotional. Then let's go back to robo investing that has been out a while.
Yes, of course, yeah.
At first, I was a little nervous. Robo investing, what's this mean? Am I going to lose clients to robo investing? I have not to this day lost a client to robo investing that I know about. We have a over 99% retention rate. So
wow.
At this point, the client touch and the client making sure
like
that emotion
want a human experience
stays out of making decisions is critical. Absolutely critical. If I can manage my clients' emotions and stop them from making what I think maybe isn't the best decision for their financial future, can a robo advisor do that? Probably not.
Right.
Someone who maybe doesn't love President Trump and wants to take everything out of the market and put in cash, and is that really in their best interest?
Right.
Probably not. So the guidance that an advisor can give is still, in my opinion, but maybe I want to keep my job, I think still really important.
Well, still, for sure right now, I'm just saying robo investing is a computer program that is just like going to follow some like, it's not going to have a thought that is going to be able to produce that logic
right.
that you're saying that your clients want. Like, but what if there's in the future, like you can go in and they're say, hey, am I using my emotions on this decision? You're like, oh, it's a 50% emotional decision. You should really take a step,
take a step back.
Take a step back,
That's going to be, that will be interesting.
Yeah. I just think that's kind of what's been on my mind is like what industry, how they get disrupted. And, will, this whole thing of mentorship and teaching, I just feel like we have to learn so much from the new generation and how they're coming up in, because they're going to have a whole new perspective on things. One of the last kind of bigger topics I want to talk about was, you just kind of mentioned our current president's name, is how has that changed? Because this is a pretty, I think, monumental shift in our, country's economic policy globally. I mean, it's been shifting away from globalization for a while, but now you basically have had from 2008, with 1 to 4 year period in between, kind of the same kind of, the Obamas kind of, rolled in a certain type of economic policy. It's related to the GFC, and we've been kind of fighting through that. And now I feel like we've come to some new point that we don't know what the next steps are going to be going forward. So I just kind of interested in your thoughts on that.
And your last sentence was critical. These new steps we don't know.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the economy or the stock market, and then the economy. The stock market hates uncertainty.
Yes.
So
all investors do.
Right? I hate it. You hate it. Everybody hates uncertainty. But we've really seen this intensity of the stock market volatility pick up. And I would say most analysts I follow, most really good advisors are saying the same thing. If you don't think the first half of this year is going to be volatile, you've been off on another island. It is really, we have to sit back and take a breath right now, because there has been a lot of emotion surrounding this election. For those who don't love President Trump, they have a certain way possibly they want to move things around in their portfolio versus someone who is pro-President Trump.
Right.
It's my job to take a step back, be non-emotional, non-political, and hopefully went into this year with a portfolio that can handle the volatility, which is what we do. That's our job.
That's your job.
And really remind people we're not in a calm period. Just know that. Just reset your expectations. The first half of this year, we got to get through these new tariffs. We got to get through all the initiatives that are going on. Chairman Powell's doing the best job he can to contain inflation. And so with all that mixed into the pot, what is best for you to be doing right now? And sometimes it's best just to take a breath.
Yeah.
Take a breath and pause. Unless you are really off on your allocation and you did nothing the last 2 years where it's been phenomenal, you've taken no profits, that's a whole nother story. But it's really a great time to take a pause and let's see what happens here this first quarter.
We don't know.
We don't know. The stock market volatility is not going to go away, and that's going to be baked in. We've had 2 really phenomenal years in the stock market. Stock market cycles are fascinating to me. I could stay up all night long reading history of the stock market cycles. Corrections are healthy in a stock market. No one loves when I say this. So corrections flush out the greed. We haven't had one in a while. Not a bad thing.
It's interesting, though, because you would have thought when they raised interest rates, the level they did in 2022, that should have decimated, the market. And it's even in my industry, it's kind of chopped it a little bit, but it hasn't really taken, I'd say, a lot of the slosh out of it, where there's just still so much capital. So much capital. And that's kind of what I feel is really driving most of these valuations, is just there's just more and more money, and there's only so many places it can go.
It can go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this is a time definitely to just take a breath, be a little more cautious, sit back, and you don't have to make a decision tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, again, going back to emotions, people feel like, I got to do something. I got to move it around.
I got to do something. That is, I think there's so much of that when as soon as a human feels like a little bit of fear and panic, what do I do? What do I do? And then sometimes those are the worst decisions you can ever make.
And that's the cycle of emotions. When you look at when the stock market's doing well, we feel euphoria, joy, exuberance. And that's when people pile in the stock market. Tons of money go in. And then as the stock market starts to come down, you feel this anxiousness, nervous. And that's when decisions are made that possibly aren't the best for you.
Yeah.
And that's when you should take the pause and recalibrate.
And so you take into account going back into a person's history. Hey, this person is going to be more likely.
Oh,
to
absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have like
absolutely?
like,
know
when you're looking at your clients, do that you have like just different ratings on them?
No, I know my clients so well,
So
and I'm not afraid to ask the why.
I'm ready for my score. I'm gonna like.
You're gonna call Drew.
No, I want to. No, I want to sit. I really want to do this like a psychoanalysis,
Yeah.
and then like when you're done, you're like, oh, this is how you make decisions.
Yeah, it is important for me to be the best advisor I can be. I need to understand why they're calling me nervous, why the wife is not nervous at all, but he's very nervous. What's going on there? Well, come to find out, he just lost his job. He's feeling insecure. Are you really nervous about the stock market, or are you just nervous that you now are unemployed, even though you have a huge emergency reserve? We've planned for this. So, okay, yeah, you're right, Michelle. I'm not even nervous about the stock market. I'm not nervous about President Trump. I'm nervous because right. So there's always, you peel back the onion, you find a little more.
Yeah, interesting.
Your next career, you could be a financial advisor.
Oh,
sounds like you'd be great.
Well, I mean, it's kind of what I do. I just have a very, unique individual product that, we advise people on. And I didn't even realize when I first got into this business that it was so much around financial advising and me having to understand people's estates, understanding their total portfolio construction, how we fit as an alternate investment into their portfolio construction. I've turned down clients before when I realized that I'm like, oh, I don't want you to be 20% invested into me, because that doesn't feel like an appropriate allocation of your resources. It's like we're more speculative, we're illiquid, like,
What's your perfect client, would you say? What's your, what does that look like? Someone that fits your investment strategy into your real estate portfolio.
Well, so we have a minimum investment of $500,000. And so I would say at the very bottom, I'd be looking for someone with a net worth more than 5 million, but preferably over 10.
Okay. Has the ability to keep it locked up.
Or
liquidity.
Or if they have a $5 million net worth, but they're earning like $2 million a year, then I feel like pretty comfortable that, all right, you're younger, you're earning. This is not, this will be a shrinking allocation to your overall net worth, because our investments are going to be every 3 to 4 years. So it's really like $125,000 a year kind of commitment.
Okay.
And so, but it is something you have to like really think about, because I know the investor that if things are going bad in the market and they have a high percentage of their thing with me and anything goes wrong, they're going to be calling me panicked. And I'm like, well, now I got to figure out how to, get liquidity in illiquid asset. And so I just never wanted to have that situation where I had an investor that I couldn't get their money back to, that needed it for family emergency or just changing circumstances in their life. So
good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, it's been a nice talk with you.
Very good talk.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I learned so much, and I'm going to go call Drew after this. And
Drew, get ready.
He's amazing, and we have a really good friendship, and he does spend a lot of time to like get to know my family. But it's funny, I bet you he does think it, but it's just not something that you come up in conversation, like,
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah, it is okay.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
Okay,
this has been
thank
great.
you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.